So let's see what options Animated Visibility has for customizing animations. As you can see, in the list of Animated Visibility composable parameters, we have visible that receives a Boolean value, a Boolean state, and we also have a parameter called enter that specifies the enter transition that will be used to fade in and to sliding the view and the UI that is supposed to be shown to the user in an animated way. And we also have exit transition that is used to animate the content as it disappears from user's view. As you can see, both of these parameters have default values. Enter by default has fade in and expand vertically, which means the content is by default faded in and expanded vertically as it appears into user's UI. And the exit value by default is equal to fade out plus shrink vertically, which means the content that is disappearing is by default faded out and shrunk vertically as it disappears from the user's view. So we can customize, fortunately we can customize these values, we can customize these parameters. For example, I can simply change these by default. I can, for example, change the enter parameter to fade in, just fade in. I import fade in, and for the exit I can use just fade out, which means just fade out the content that is supposed to disappear from the user's view. Let's close the split part. I don't have any design for now and I need more space for coding. I run the application again. Also, I can change the true value for the initial value I've checked to false. It's already installing, so this change will be deferred to other runs. So show content. As you can see, once I deselect it, it is disappeared and it is faded out. Fade in, fade out, fade in, fade out. This is very simple animation that I'm using, but I'm going to show you how to customize it. For example, I can add another animation to this fade in animation using slide animation. Slide in vertically, slide in horizontally, because by default it was sliding vertically, and I'm showing you another type and another animation that is available. Slide in horizontally, which means I'm going to show the content sliding into the scene from the left or from the right. So let's see what options slide in horizontally has for us. It has initial offset X, which by default is minus full width divided by 2. Okay, I change it to initial. First, name the parameter, and for its value, note that it is a lambda, so I need to pass in a lambda, and it here, the parameter it here for the lambda, is the same as full width. So since I'm going to make it appear from the left, I use, for example, minus it. I'm going to set the offset of the view, the UI, equal to the full width minus full width, which means the offset will be something like here, from the left of the view, from the left of the UI area that I have here. And the other parameter for sliding horizontally is its type of animation. So I'm going to change that animation, that default animation, to animation spec, the name of the parameter, and for its value I'm going to use a spring animation. I import spring and I give it a damping ratio, equals to spring dot damping ratio high bouncy. Of course, you probably will not want to use this in real applications because it's a little bit exaggerating the animation, but it's for demo and it's cool here. So animation spec damping ratio is that, specifying how hard it is for the spring to get to peace and start moving and bouncing. And here we have high bouncing for our spring. And the next parameter for the spring is stiffness. By default it is medium stiffness, and I like that, so I don't need to change it. And also for the visibility threshold, which by default is null, I'm going to use some value, like for example int offset for the X I enter 0, and for Y I enter 100. This is for the enter animation, so we customize the enter animation by adding fade in to slide in horizontally, which in return took an animation spec of the type spring. And for the fading out and for the exit animation, I'm going to use another animation that is available as the exit transition type. And I can use fade out. As you can see, fade out returns exit transition, but this time I'm not going to use fade out. Actually, I'm going to just use shrink out, and one of the parameters that it has shrink towards alignment dot end. Looks like alignment dot end is not accepted. Its type should be bottom end. So bottom end, actually its default value is bottom end, so I don't need to specify that unless I want to use something like start, bottom start, which is kind of equivalent to bottom end. And also, what other parameters it has? Target size. The target size, because I want to shrink it, let's make it shrink it down to 0, by default it is that way. It is shrinking down to 0 and it's fine. And for the animation spec, we need to specify an animation spec for it. Animation spec. This time I'm going to use a simple tween animation. For a duration of 1000 milliseconds or 1 second. And now let's run the application. You will see that there's a lot of ways to customize these animations for your animated visibility composable, because this composable is really rich in terms of giving the user animation options for the content inside it. So show content, as you can see, it is appearing, but we don't see that much of the spring effect. But for the shrink animation, for the exit animation that we used shrink out, we can see that it is shrinking out. Nice. So I can use something like shrink in to give something equivalent to shrink out for the enter animation. But I suspect that there's a problem with our int offset here. If I change that, probably it will work. This is the visibility threshold for the spring animation, for which you need to pass in a suitable value. Fade in. Yes, this time we have a better bouncing than shrink out. Yes. Shrink out. Yes. So for the enter animation, we have a spring animation, and for the exit animation, we have a shrink out animation. And if you want to see the full list of animations that are available for use as enter and exit animations, you can head over to the enter exit transition.kt file that is inside the animation package of Jetpack Compose system. So you can see the full list of composables defined here, the full list of functions that are defined for creating animations. We have fade in, fade out, which return enter and exit transition respectively. And we also have slide out, expand in, shrink out. Sorry, I told you already about something called shrink in. We don't have something called shrink in. We have expand in fact. In contrast to shrink out, we have expand in. So for the enter animation, we actually can use, in addition to fade in, we can use shrink in, expand in. And the good thing is that we can add these animations on top of each other: fade in, expand in, plus slide in horizontally. And the effect of the total effect of these animations is that they can be combined and applied to our content to create nice and exciting animations. So let's see what effect now we have for expand in. But before that, let's check for the options. Alignment bottom end expands from alignment bottom end. Let's change that to actually expand from alignment dot bottom end bottom start. Let's see if I can use top start. Yes, I can. And also we have initial size of 0, which is cool. We start from an initial value, initial size of 0. It expands from nothing to the full size of the UI, and that's good. And for the animation spec, because we have already specified the spring animation for our slide in horizontally animation, we don't need to specify an animation spec for the expanding. So let's run the app to see the result. Show the content, please. As you can see, it is expanding in, and now it is expanded out. It's shrinked out. Okay, expand in, shrink out, expand in, shrink out. And the interesting thing here is that once we added the expand in transition to the list of our animations that we had here, we lost the effect of slide in horizontally, which was a side effect of combining the 3 animations here. So I'm gonna remove the expand in for now, and let's also adjust the int offset to something like 200 for the X, and this is taking an initial offset X because it is moving horizontally, so we should have a better bounce here. I run the app again. Please show the content. Nice. Shrink out, expand in, show the animation with spring animation, shrink out, enter, exit. Okay, cool. One thing that you might ask yourself is that any content that we have in this area is moving with the same animation. So we have used the spring animation as the enter animation, and as you can see, the whole content, whether it's the image, it's the text, it is animated with the spring animation. And then I use the exit animation, and it is applying and putting its effect on the whole UI that we have here, the text and the image. What if we have a way, what if we can have a way to add more animations and add a different animation for a child that we have in our view tree, in our UI tree? The good news is that it is possible. So I have good news for you, that it is possible inside Animated Visibility to have a different type of animation for your children. For example, I want to have a different type of animation for the text that I have here. So how do we do that? We do it using a modifier that is available in the Animated Visibility scope. So I go to the text section in the modifier section, in the modifier parameter for the text, and I have a modifier for it called animate enter exit, which allows me to specify enter and exit animations for it. So for enter, I use, for example, slide in, vertically. I want to make the text appear from the bottom of the screen. So slide in horizontally, initial offset Y, because I want to go from the bottom, so I use 2 multiplied by it. It here, as I mentioned earlier, is the full height. These parentheses should be changed to lambda curly braces. And after initial offset, we also have animation spec. So by default it has some animation spec, some default animation spec, but I can use, for example, the spring one or the 2-in animation. So I use a 2-in animation here for a duration of 1000 milliseconds or 1 second, like that. And I run the application. This time, as the content is appearing with an animation, once I check the checkbox, the text should have a different type of transition as it appears into user's view. As you can see, yes. Disappear, appear, yes. As you can see, the text appears from the bottom, and it shows us that it has a different animation that is different from the animation that is used for the whole animated visibility area. So I told you how to add custom and different animation to the children of animated visibility, in addition to the animation that you apply to the whole animated visibility composable. Before we move any further, I really hate the text being displayed into the center of this area. I want to display it in the bottom of the box, but for some reason it is being displayed here in the center. So for the text, I am looking for, yes, as you can see, it is using alignment.center. Yes. So alignment.bottom, alignment.bottom center. Yes, it is accepted. I run the application again. Show the content, and Jetpack Compose is awesome. Yes, it's really awesome. And disappear the content. Cool. Nice. So far we learned how to create animated visibility, how to add custom animation to animated visibility, how to add different animation to the children of animated visibility. And the next thing that I want to tell you about animated visibility is another version or another variant of animated visibility that is a little bit different, and it's a little bit different to use than this version that we already used in the previous parts. Let's see how it's different. So in this version that we used, we had a parameter called visible that took a Boolean value, which was either selected or not selected, which was either visible or not visible. When the state changed to visible, the content was animated in, and when the value changed to not visible and to false, actually the content was animated out in some way, using a variation, using a combination of different mechanisms of animations that we had for enter and exit parameters. But there's another variant of animated visibility that has that takes another variable and from another type actually. As you can see, the different versions of animated visibility, we have a version that actually takes a different, let me find it, yes, visible state. We have here, it's the first version. It has a version that takes a parameter visible state and its type is mutable transition state. Let's create it. Let's create a parameter for it. I'm gonna define it here. Val show equals remember transition mutable transition state. And its initial value is, I give it false, and then I use apply to also specify its final or target value, its target state, and I specify true, which means it starts from an invisible state. First it is not visible, but then once this animated visibility enters the composition tree, which means once we run the application and we open this activity, then this animation starts running from the initial value of false to the target state of true, which means the animation that we had here will be run using the settings that we had applied using the enter animations. So I'm going to use this show variable, which its type is mutable transition state, inside animated visibility. So I remove the already existing variable parameter and its value visible equals checked. This time I use visible state, and for its type I enter show. Note that we don't need the show content checkbox anymore, so I disable it inside our column. For the checkbox I disable it, enabled equals false, because I don't need it anymore, and I run the application again. Once I run the app, the animation will be run and launched automatically, and I don't need to trigger it manually. Look, there we go. Once I run the application, it automatically faded in, it automatically animated the content in, and let's exit the activity, run it again. There we go. You can see that the animation, the enter animation is running, and the different animation that we had for the text is also running. Exit, launch it again. There we go. The spring animation, exactly what we had defined for the enter animation, aligned with the animation for the text. And we didn't manually trigger the animation. It is disabled. The checkbox is disabled because the animation is just starting to run as the composable enters the composition tree and is being displayed to the user. So that's it for animated visibility. I hope that you liked these lessons about creating animated visibility, creating different animations, customizing the animations for animated visibility, adding different animation for the children of animated visibility, and also using a different variant of animated visibility that takes a different parameter than visible called visible state, that is of the type mutable transition state, and allows you to run the animation automatically as you run the app and your activity or your composable. See you in the next lesson.